G'day and welcome to Viking Superpowers. I'm David Lovegrove. Today's episode we're going to continue on from where I left off in the University of Lund and have a look at some objects I discovered there that then became something else that led me into a way of thinking that has blossomed into quite an incredible theory. But first I'm going to read you something from a classic old text, Introduction to Old Norse by E.V. Gordon. This text has been a standard text for all Norse scholars for 100 years. And here he says, Sweden was the mother of the Scandinavian peoples. From Sweden came both the Danes and the Norwegians. In the early days of Scandinavian expansion, Norway was called the Northveger, the North Way, just as in later Viking times the Baltic lands were called the Osterveja, the East Way. The home of the oldest Norse culture and the oldest Norse traditions was Sweden, though these traditions had to be carried to distant Iceland before they were given an enduring form. Snorri Sturluson made no mistake when he began his history of the northern nations, Heimskringla, with the legends of ancient Sweden. So that's very interesting, and this is where my journey of discovery was starting. The heartland of Sweden, down in Scania, where I'd seen the amazing Volund brooch, the flying elf, the smoking gun as I consider it, pointing to ancient high-tech, something with jets, something with air intakes, a man in a spacesuit, space boots, a helmet, other aeronautical parts of it, bird-shaped artifacts that I found that often have wings that really look like swing-wing fighter plane wings. They don't look like bird wings. So the next thing I found was this amazing object. When I first saw it, I instantly thought of some of the UFO reports that talk about people seeing motherships surrounded by little craft, and the little craft will often fly out, do all sorts of unusual things, and then fly back. This object is from the Bronze Age, so it's older than Volund's brooch, which is from 1000 AD. It's older than those bird-shaped objects. This is a truly ancient object. The Bronze Age of Sweden goes back to between 2000 BC and around about 500 BC. So when you look at this object, the first thing I noticed was the cross-shaped circle in the centre. Now, anybody who's been around ancient Sweden, who's looked at the ancient rock carvings of Sweden, knows that this is considered a sun symbol. And it's also a symbol of the sky people. The interesting thing is, I've known about this symbol most of my life. And this old book, The Mound People, introduced me to it. You'll see there the exact same symbol carried by this strange looking character. And there's what turns out to be a female character there. And in this picture, we are given what scholars consider to be the spring wedding, where the Sky Father and the Earth Mother mate and they produce the royal line. It's also considered to be a fertility symbol generally, but the interesting thing is this symbol and this meeting of male and female, one from the sky and one from the earth, is very common in the ancient carvings in Sweden. But getting back to this very interesting object, why would you make such a thing? What does it actually mean? You'll see that there's 8 shapes around the sun shape. Perhaps these are indicating stars or planets. To my eye, this is a symbol of something that was seen back in those times in the Bronze Age of Sweden by lots and lots of people. This is the religion of those ancient people when they saw great glowing sun-like craft in their skies. And I've come to believe that these craft actually are the Aesir that Snorri Sturluson's works tell us about, that Prosetta, that Heimskringla, the history of the Norse kings in the early chapters, and also the Poetic Edda, are telling us about. Stories of ancient powerful people who came to Scandinavia, mated with the local ladies, and formed royal lines, and also many other lines. I left the darkened room where all these wonderful artifacts were kept, And I went into a brightly lit room, and the first thing I saw was a huge rock. And instantly I saw the same so-called sun symbol right in the middle of the rock. Now, as we look at the rock, you'll see that it's surrounded by what the scholars generally call cup marks. And weirdly, the scholars all say, we don't know what these mean. These must have taken a long time to carve out. They must have been very important and meaningful, but we don't know what they could mean. Now, I don't think I have a particularly unusual eye, but the first thing I see is stars. When I look at that rock, when I look at this beautiful rock, I see stars of all different sizes and shapes. And I see the sun symbol. So this is either saying our sun is out there with all these other stars, which maybe they understood they were suns, or this is saying great glowing craft were in our skies and they came from the stars. Now, as we go on in this series, you'll find there's more and more evidence that clearly points to this idea that they believed these ancient sky people came from the stars. Now I'm going to show you a couple of really incredible things that I discovered after I came back from Iceland. I stayed in Denmark for a couple of days and I went back to the museum there because I was really keen to see what they had to say on this matter. The first thing I'm showing you is something that really spooked me. They think it's a mirror. It's made out of amber and glass. As soon as I looked at it, I thought alien abduction. I thought, there's a craft, the classic glowing red-orange, which so many flying saucer reports and abduction accounts report. And there below it is something that looks almost like a stairway. Or it could be just a sort of a tapering column of light. Now, if you look at this next one, this is a stone carving, and it shows exactly the same thing. Now, when we go into it closer, what do we see inside this circle? Do you see that there's a man in there? Do you see that there's a figure quite like the one that's on the cover of my old Mound People book with the Sky Father, one of the sky people on it? Can you see him there with that shape that is sometimes interpreted as a shield, but I think what it means is actually this is a sky person. This is one of the powerful ones from the sky. If we go over to this other quite mind-boggling pair of drawings based on rock carvings, you will see exactly the same supposed sun shape, and look, it's obvious that there's people in there. And this second one particularly really blows my mind. There is no doubt at all that that's a humanoid figure waving to us from that craft. This next particular object really blew my mind. This is also from the Bronze Age, and it's exactly like those supposed mirrors we saw before made out of jade and glass, and the one carved on stone. It's got the handle, there's something coming down, it's got ridges across that handle. Really looks for all the world like Jacob's ladder, as described in the Bible. But I see it as a flying craft with some kind of ray that comes down and lifts people up, Bronze Age, Scandinavian people. Maybe it targets wizards and special people, but it targets people and it takes them up into this sun craft. And when we look at the craft, we see there's a face. And as we go in close, you wouldn't say it's an alien face, but it's definitely got big eyes and a very solemn, sort of almost blissed out expression. You could even say that the character's wearing goggles, but that might be a stretch. It could be just stylized eyes. But the thing is, what an extraordinary piece of work. I mean, I didn't know that they could make such things 3,000 years ago, but when you really look at it, it's so mechanical. It looks machine made. I don't suppose it actually is, but whatever, it certainly is an incredible artistic expression of a really profound experience, and quite possibly the person who made this had the experience. It just has that feel to me as if, a skilled person. That's what wizards were. They were people with great knowing, great depth of skill and craft and understanding. These were the people that were targeted for breeding with because they were the people worth breeding with. They didn't just have physical beauty and health, but they also had developed minds, probably they had paranormal superpowers. But this particular object, I think, is one of the most extraordinary things, and it's really hard to see this as a mirror. It's obviously not a mirror. It's telling us something. It's just up to us to be able to have the imagination and the wit and the background to interpret it. And I interpret it as an ancient testimony, as clearly as if it was 1,000 words telling us there was beings in the sky, powerful beings, beautiful beings. They had some way of capturing us and taking us up into their craft. And I'm not saying bad things happened in that craft. It would seem that it was something to do with interbreeding. It would seem that it was something to do with studying further. Or it could be just something to do with meeting and talking, as in the amazing stories that Snorri Sturluson tells us in Gylfaginning and in Skald Skapamal, in the Prose Edda that he wrote in the early 1200s. When I first saw this, I thought, how could you not see this for what it is? But people are blind if they can't open their mind. If they can't conceive of something as strange as this, of visitation by high-tech people from somewhere else, or even if the crypto-terrestrial idea is true, people that are ancient civilizations hidden from us under the water, perhaps deep in the sea, here to observe us, here to guide us on a long mission. Maybe they swap over teams, but they also could be under the ground. They could be in the labyrinths under the earth, same as in Jules Verne's story, Journey to the Centre of the Earth, which coincidentally starts in Iceland and finishes in Iceland. Somebody waving to us. I find this the most human and touching picture, actually, and I think it's worthy of making into a badge or a t-shirt, because it's essentially a friendly thing. It's like, hi, how you going? And if anyone knows the story of Father Gill back in 1959, who was a Church of England minister, like my friend Paul Anthony Wallace, Father Gill was stationed up in Papua New Guinea, which at that time was a protectorate of the Australian government. It was part of Australia. It was one of our states as a protectorate. And he and 37 of his parishioners, the Papua New Guinean people there at this mission, saw a craft for 2 days for a couple of hours each time. It's one of the most really authentic, incredible reports ever. And something that really strikes me and anybody else who reads the story is that at one point the people on the ground, Father Gill and his people, started waving to this craft, and after a while they could see little beings standing up on top that looked like people, looked human, and they started waving back. And that's, at the time they said, well, maybe this is some kind of secret technology, that like a human technology we don't know about, but it seems unlikely to me. Why would you show yourself like that if you're a secret government organisation running this thing? So we're really onto something here, and as I found all these ancient things from the Bronze Age, the connection with the Viking Age stories became stronger and stronger. And I really believe that the stories we're being told, the stories that the Vikings believed in, are actually stories from the Bronze Age. They're stories of the sky people from the Bronze Age, and we know from Snorri's stories that the Aesir, the people from Asia Minor, Asia as they simply called it back then, left that area at some stage. I think BC, could have been right up to the time of Christ. That's another story, but they definitely travelled north according to Snorri, and they established kingdoms, and they bred with the people in Russia, in France, in Saxland, which is northern Germany, now part of Denmark, Sweden and Norway. All these stories are considered euhemeristic by most scholars, and by a lot of people who've learnt from these same scholars. They consider these stories written by a Christian trying to explain away the Norse gods as not really true, but just stories that happened to ancient kings, ancient peoples, not really gods, not really a competition to Christianity. That's basically what it was about. But I think that's true. I don't think they were gods, but I believe that they were pretending to be gods, and they were people who were super advanced, and the people of that time naturally considered they were gods and that they were magical, that they were wizards. And I think they had a technology way ahead of what we have now, and they had paranormal personal powers way ahead of what we see now. And that's the thrust of my channel and my upcoming book, Viking Superpowers, because I believe these things are finally being refound, and it's important that we refind it, and it's important that we ordinary humans discover that we're not as ordinary as we thought. And as we look back into the past, see what our ancestors wrote about, see what they said was normal, the amazing things that they said were normal, I think we can find ourselves. And who knows what the future holds. So I'll see you next episode.